Hey, welcome to Fathering Our Future, the podcast for dads. I'm Anthony Vandegrift, and I'm not the perfect dad, but every day I am trying to be better. And one of the ways that I know I can be better as a dad, that you can be better as a dad, is by trying to be a better husband. So to help with that today, I'm joined by Adam King with Dear Young Married Couple, and we're going to talk about marriage.
What right now am I doing that's going to create something that I'm really proud of, that I have no regrets? And almost always that has to do with relationship, really being present with their kids, making memories, making the space and time for memories. Because, if you go and work to save the whole world, but you lose your kids, it's not much of a win.
If you're a dad who wants to embrace your God-given mission, make sure you subscribe to Fathering Our Future wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also get more content on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. And if you want even more than that, then head over to www.fatheringourfuture.com. Well, Adam, thank you so much for being with me today on the podcast. I'm so happy to have you.
Man, it's good to be here.
Yeah, we had a good time last time. We had a fun interview, and if anyone's listening, they didn't get a chance to hear it, go to Dear Young Married Couple, and you can check out that interview that Adam and Carissa, his wife, did with me. But I have the worst half of DYMC today. I have Adam, but I know he's going to be, a tremendous help, because I thoroughly believe that as we strengthen our marriage, what we're actually doing is also strengthening our home and our family. I believe that truly is a side effect of focusing on our marriage. But you're the expert, not me. I'm going to let you handle all of those topics today. But before we jump into all of the fun stuff, let's talk about the good stuff about your life in particular. So tell us a little bit about yourself. How long have you and Carissa been married? How many kids do you have? What do you enjoy doing? All that fun stuff.
Okay, cool. Yes. So my wife, I've been married for 15 years. And I have two kids. Adeline is 5 and Forrest is 4. They're very much 5 and 4. And I totally love being a dad. A little bit about me. We live in Sacramento, California, and I think I love pretty much all things outdoors. So whether it's fishing, hunting, bike riding, I love golf. That's my drug of choice. And like fly fishing, all that stuff. I just cool. Enjoy doing something.
That's neat. And I know I'm in God's country. I'm in Texas. I know you live in California. Grace will be given to you for this episode. Yeah. But I have heard from people, because a lot of people have made the exodus from California to Texas. You're welcome whenever you want to. But everyone always tells me that outdoors life in California is unmatched.
Yes. I would have to agree, because, man, so actually over Father's Day, we've had this backpacking trip planned for a long time. And so we went out for just 2 days, one night, and it was amazing. So we live in Sacramento, which is probably about 2 hours away from the mountains, or hour and 45 from like real mountains. And it was great. We took the kids, put little backpacks on them, and we went up, did like a mile, a little bit over a mile hike. And actually mid-June, we couldn't get over a pass to a small lake we're trying to get into, because there was so much snow. So it was incredible. So it got down to about 48 degrees.
Wow.
But during the day it was 70, 73. It just snow all around us, and it was amazing. It was beautiful. The kids loved it.
Yeah.
So that's California. Yeah,
rub it in. I think our heat index was 116 yesterday here in the good old state of Texas. So you can keep your temperatures to yourself, and I'm just going to pretend like you didn't talk about that. But we are talking about marriages today, and this is something that you and your wife do professionally. You focus on this. You have a great podcast, a successful podcast, Dear Young Married Couple. And tell us how that started.
Man, that's a kind of an interesting story. If you would have told me 10 years ago, like you're going to be talking to married couples, I'd have been like, you are full of it. You have no idea what you're talking about. Because I didn't see myself going that direction. Actually, I thought I was going to, find a career in music.
Okay.
I play piano. I taught piano for years. Went to school a little bit for piano, and then I discovered that's not for me. Then I had a crisis of faith while I was at college, thinking I was getting my music degree, and figured out that I really didn't know what I believed. Not in the sense that I didn't know the Bible. I had hundreds of Bible verses stored in my heart, but when the teacher says that the Bible is filled with errors and it's all man-made and not inspired and everything else, that threw me for a loop. So it really ripped the rug from under my feet. And so I decided at that point I wanted to go into philosophy. So I got my degrees in philosophy, and then from the University of the Pacific, and then I went to Biola University and got my degree in apologetics. Not the path you would think I'd be working with couples. So had all that. At this point, I was teaching. I had a fairly large studio teaching piano, and I loved witnessing, but I also loved coaching people in life, just because I've always been a student of self-development and always wanted to grow. It's always been a theme in my life. Always reading, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so, of course, when you read a good book, you always want to pass it on. You tell them all about it. Well, I found myself talking and preaching to a lot of my students, just like, spotting areas in their life. They'd share things. I'm like, well, have you read this, or have you tried this? And I started just life coaching and loved doing it. And at this point, Krista had been counseling for many years, and someone actually came to her and said, hey, would you do a marriage seminar? And she's like, let me talk to my husband. And she said, would you do a marriage seminar with me? Because they want me to do it. She's like, I'll give you the material. You can read over it, and you could just, kind of tag along. And I said, no. She's like, babe, reconsider. and so I ended up doing that with her and really enjoyed it, and thought, maybe this would be an avenue to start working with people, life coaching, helping them work through their issues. And that's really where kind of the idea was started percolating in me, because I like coffee, so might as well use coffee terms.
There you go.
And so and then it was actually on a backpacking trip, we started kicking around the idea of Dear Young Married Couple. She's like, I want to write a book and just kind of coaching marriages, because I'm running into a lot of people with marriage problems, and I think maybe we can offer something. But what we came down to is like, well, who's going to believe a couple that's only been married for, I think at that time, 8 years, or somewhere around there? Why would they listen to us? Because we're, kind of started. She had a lot of experience. We had a pretty good marriage. And so he said, well, why don't we just curate from people that have been married a long time, and we can kind of use their advice and share that with younger couples. And that was kind of our heartbeat. So that's where like a letter from an older couple to a younger couple, Dear Young Married Couple, was birthed. And it just really, after that backpacking trip, the book was actually never written. Just because it kind of took on a life of its own, because we knew that we needed to market it. We need to have lots of people kind of join a community, join a kind of a common goal of strengthening marriages, because as we all know, strong marriages make for strong churches, and strong churches really do help a community.
Right.
So that's the story of really how it became what it is today.
Wow. That's really interesting. So now, have you, since y'all started the seminar and the podcast, have you gone and done any further education within the niche of marriage?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yes, I have several certifications, and
Got it.
I probably, Chrissy says this, so it's not just me, I've probably read more books than her on marriage. I know I have.
Yeah.
But of course, like, it's not just marriage, because marriage, it's interesting. It's two people. So we're talking about the communication, the union between two people, but two people bring their own stuff. And that stuff sometimes causes issues. So you can't just read about marriage, but you also have to read on the mental health, trauma, all those things, the baggage that we bring in. Because sometimes, well, always, the individual things affect how we communicate, how we react, and really how we function inside of a marriage. Because the more healthy we become, it really does influence the union that we create. I've learned advice is easily received, but very rarely applied. Normally, you have to help them see their issue, and that can't be in a direct way. Normally, it has to be in an experiential way. That's why counseling works, because they start to see, and normally it's in the moment where they catch themselves. There it is.
Okay, so let's do this. Love the story. Love how it started. Love kind of the idea of the letterhead from couples who have gone before us, dear young married couple. Love how the story came together and love what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
But you talked about leading into that, how your wife mentioned all of these issues that married couples are having that she's trying to deal with and that she's wanting to help address. And I know every couple, they have their struggles. And I say struggles
Mm-hmm.
plural because there's never just one isolated thing that we deal with and then we're done.
Yeah.
There's multiple things because, as you've already alluded to, we are individuals and we are coming together to form this union, but we have our baggage, we have our
Mm-hmm.
issues, we have our trauma. So with your experience in working with people, can you identify what some of the prominent struggles are in marriages? Just the most common issues that marriages face.
Gary Thomas said that the best wedding gift that God ever gave me was a full-length mirror called my spouse. And I fully believe that within the context of marriage, we get to see ourselves more truly. And sometimes we don't like what we see. And so, and we reject that, right? So we have to learn, as we come into this union, we have to learn to negotiate. We have to learn to communicate. We have to learn to open up, because, you can't have intimacy without that vulnerability. The word for vulnerability in the Latin is like Voltaire or something like that. I forgot the exact Latin, but it really means to wound. So with vulnerability, you're giving the person the ability or the tools, but through which they can wound you.
Hmm.
And a lot of people who have been wounded a lot in their life are very, very hesitant to wounding. Like, they don't want to be wounded. They have their guards up. They have their defenses up. So when people come into marriage and they're expected, oh, we need to be vulnerable, you need to open up, you need to tell what's wrong and what you need, that's scary for a lot of people, and they resist it. And there's a difference between being transparent and being vulnerable. So, like, I can go to the zoo and look at a lion through a glass, and it's transparent. I could see the lion, I could show off the lion. But the thing is I'm not very scared. I'm not worried, because that problem is still behind a glass. I haven't really made myself vulnerable, have I? We can see it, but it's not really there, or it's not threatening me in any way. But what marriage has a way of doing is making us vulnerable. And if we're not vulnerable, we have other issues too. There's a lot of frustration on the other side of this. But as soon as we take away that glass, the lion can come out of its cage, and now we're vulnerable to be wounded. So with people with a lot of trauma, or people that have been hurt, and here's the thing, everyone has been hurt in their life. No one goes through life unhurt. We all have experiences that we've learned to navigate And we've learned, don't go there, don't share that because I could be hurt. And so within marriage, I see a lot of people not really making space to express their needs or make space just to feel. So when we have hurts, generally we want to get away from shame. We want to get away from pain. So we don't look at those things anymore. But the thing is when we don't look at them, they resurface. They haunt, they follow us because we haven't processed, we haven't um, forgiven, we haven't uh, laid those things to rest. And there are ways to do that. Um, there's a really amazing book, if people are interested in what I'm talking about, called The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk.
Yep.
Incredible story. But literally, the body does keep the score on all these things and all these experiences. I actually just worked with a guy um, just actually yesterday that was struggling with anger. He's a really gentle man, good man, but at times he's gotten really angry. And of course, whenever you get really angry, your spouse gets worried because, like, whoa, what does this mean? Like, I didn't see this part of you. And so as we started just digging and being curious, by the way, curiosity is the most amazing gift that God has given us for marriage. You know, curiosity will help you learn so much about yourself, but also about your spouse.
Hmm.
But just being curious, he started opening up that his dad was very abusive. Um, and he, of course, almost everyone downplays the abuse. They never say, "Yeah, it was horrible. I had a horrible child." It was like, "Oh, yeah, it was." There was, I don't know if you'd call it abuse. It was just, like, whenever you hear the words "just," they're minimizing. But the thing is everything affects us
Right.
because it's what's happening, but it's really not what's happened to us that causes trauma or causes what I'm talking about, but it's how we respond to it. So it could be a little thing, but if we respond to it in a very negative way and it makes a mark on us, um, it could cause a scar.
Yeah.
And scars always have scar tissue, and scars don't have nerve endings.
So you started talking about how when you get married and you look at your spouse, that your spouse is this full length mirror for you to be able to see yourself. And that's not something that we
Mm-hmm.
always like to see.
Mm-hmm.
And you alluded to issues with potentially low self esteem, insecurities, and then tying this back into our childhood and trauma that we faced and how we perceive how we were raised by our parents and all of these different things that we've responded to in one way or the other that have shaped who we are
Mm-hmm.
today. Let me ask you this, because I know that all of those things would have been true from the dawn of time, but do you think and do you see with couples that you work with today that social media has amplified any of these issues? Just because, I mean, I know you can get on social media and you can see the picture perfect couple, or you can see the picture perfect family, or the man who is doing everything. He's got, you know, he's in shape and he's got the nice car and the nice house and he's making all the money and all this wonderful stuff. And you see the same thing with the women. Do you think
Yeah.
that all of these perceptions that are being thrown into our, our news feeds, which they're all doctored up and they're all photoshopped and they all have filters on them anyway, but we don't think about those things in the moment. Do you think that that creates a greater monster that we have to wrestle with today if we're not taught how to respond to these things?
Yes. I think what social media has provided us with is an incredible distraction. It used to be that we'd go out, you know, I'm just going to paint it with a really general brush, but we would go and work in a field, or we'd go and it'd be quiet. We'd be alone with our thoughts. But social media has made it possible for us to completely distract ourselves
Mm.
so that we don't have to face, so we can live on going from thing to thing to thing to thing and never slow down. And really, like, I guess the core of what I'm talking about is sometimes I think men just keep going. We just put our head down and keep going, but we don't slow down and take inventory and feel and become acquainted with emotions, because I think that our kids really do need us to be present. And the major the major element I think that is missing right now, that one of the huge issues I'm working with a lot of men, is simply just the busyness of life. We take on so much and we think we're doing our kids a favor by doing all these things for them, when they really want is their dad's presence.
Yeah.
They want him to be there when he's there. And when we're running from stuff, and when I say running from stuff, like when I'm talking about all, when I talked about all the trauma or stuff like that, it's those things teach us something about us. And it's normally in the form of the I am statement. And it's like, I'm not good enough, or I in order like to prove myself, I have to do these things, or I have to make this amount of money. And they're chasing this moving goalpost. Instead, like somebody just recently asked me, Andrew Bentley, he said, "What is success, Adam?" He says, "I wish I would have defined what success was." So I think simply men defining what they want out of life, rather than just doing and hoping it will work out, that they really ask, what right now am I doing that's going to, create something that I'm really proud of, that I have no regrets. And almost always that has to do with relationship, really being present with their kids, making memories, making the space and time for memories. Because, if you go and work to save the whole world, but you lose your kids, it's not much of a win.
My pastor has said several times in the 30, almost 40 years of ministry that he's been a part of, that he has been at the bedside of a lot of people before they have passed. And the conversations that he's had, he said,
Mm.
I've never had anyone say, I wish I'd made more money than I did. I wish I had bought more houses or more cars. I wish that I had, achieved more material things. All of
Yeah.
the last wishes are, I wish I'd spent more time with my wife. I wish I'd spent more time
Yep.
with my kids. I wish I'd focused more on my relationship with God. And it's always pointing back to these relationships that they
So
didn't
true.
pursue. Yeah. Um, so I think that's good for us to define success, because success should not necessarily look the same for every individual.
Mm.
We're not all trying to live one style of life. Some people, their version of success might include a whole lot of money, and other people, this is
Mm.
enough just to keep living the way that we like to live, because we don't need or want all the extra bougie things in life. We just want to live on a lot of land and be in a little cabin and not have to talk to
Yep.
people. And so, maybe they need just $1 million and they're set for the next 30 years. Who knows? So success does look different. Now, I want to talk about the curiosity element that you brought up. I think that
Mm.
this is unique. How you talked about this is the greatest gift that we have for our marriage. I think that this could play into a lot of ways, but I'll throw this to you. Does curiosity become a thing that we overcome maybe insecurities in our own low self-esteem, and we start to kind of poke a little bit at ourselves and ask, why are we this way? Why do we do this? Why am I, afraid to open up emotionally? And is it also something that plays into you and your spouse, and going back to that vulnerability, to where, what, I'm going to let the lion out of the cage a little bit, and I'm going to put myself in a place where I could potentially be wounded.
Mm.
Elaborate on that element of curiosity.
I think curiosity is so incredible, because it gives us an insight into ourselves without shame, without really negative feelings. Most people that I talk to that haven't done a lot of introspection are actually extremely harsh on themselves. I mean, if I were to hook them up to a Bose speaker, a lot of what I would hear is a lot of negativity toward themselves. And a lot of people use this strategy to motivate themselves. Like if I'm harsh on myself, I'm going to be I'll be better next time. Or they get into an argument with their wife and they're super negative about their wife, but they're also negative about themselves, and the kids sometimes get the brunt of that.
Mm.
So why are we talking about this? So curiosity gives us kind of a stepping stool to start asking, why am I acting this way? What am I feeling right now? Um, why do I have this defensiveness around this subject? And you'll probably come up with stories in your life that you've been burned around this, or this has been difficult. And instead of, I'll get over that, and sending shame and sending anger and in that direction of like, you should be better than this, shoulds, it sounds like a lot of shoulds, right? Shoulds always lead to shame.
Mm.
So when I hear shoulds in the people's language, I know that there is shame present. Because if you should have done this, shame on you for not.
Sure.
So instead of shoulding and sending all this negativity, what I like to do is I ask, I have these parts of me that I don't like. And there's parts of me that I do like. I really am thankful for my spirit led self. I try to live out of this part of me that I would see as me, but I have these parts of me that I don't like. Like Paul said, the good that I do, I don't.
Yep.
And I'll let you guys quote that because it's a confusing mess. But what he's pointing at is there's parts of Paul that he is not liking, that he doesn't like, that he's trying to continually keep under subjugation, like trying to manage. And I think that's just like us. And so if we can curiously go to those parts of us that are hurt or wounded or defensive or pained in some way, we're able to more effectively manage it because we're loving it. Like for instance, let me use an example. For a long time, and a long time, I have had a very difficult time praying, having a really consistent prayer life. Um, it just wasn't something that came naturally for me to like wake up at a certain time and pray and go about my day. I did pray a lot. I prayed throughout the day. I prayed, all the time, but I didn't have this like consistent thing, and that was always a source of shame for me until I started. Really, I started seeing Jesus as more of a relationship, kind of like my wife. Whereas I don't have to feel shame for not going there. It's just like you know, maybe God showed up to my prayer meeting and is just missing me. He's like, man, I showed up and you're not here. And so instead of like heaping this shame on me, I started seeing God as like, hey, like more beckoning. And that took curiosity to say, like, how would Jesus see me
Yeah.
in this moment? Would he be angry that I'm not showing up? Would he be angry? Like, I haven't seen you for 3 weeks, really? Like, he's not throwing all this anger. He's more lovingly saying, hey, come on, let's talk. Let's talk about this. Rather than you beating yourself up and still not showing up and avoiding the pain of prayer, let's be curious about that. Let's look at this. And this takes some discipline to really open up and to look at and to be honest. But you could do this in every part of your life with your marriage. Why am I acting in this way?
Yeah.
And with my kids, why did I just blow up? What caused that? Why seeing my son do that? Why that caused that reaction in me? And instead of I shouldn't have done that. Well, maybe you could just ask, what was present in me? Why that caused such a rise? Do I have a story behind this that I need to kind of seek to understand and to maybe bring Jesus to that moment in my life so that I can start bringing Jesus to this moment in the present where my son needs me to show up, because we're all giving our kids their inner voice. The inner voice that you hear, the shame that you hear, the negative self-talk that you hear a lot of times comes from the primary caregivers in our life.
Mm.
And so you're giving that to your kids. So what kind of inner voice do you want them to live with?
Yeah. It's so good. Our kids see, hear everything, and they absorb so much. And the reality is even if there are things that we do that are not directed and pointed at our kids, if they're around and they're in the vicinity, they still absorb those things. They still internalize those things. It's just like what you said earlier. Sometimes it's just a matter of how you responded to a certain situation. And we don't always know how our kids respond to certain things. I think this is why it's so important that we try to have great relationships with them where they feel comfortable opening up like, hey dad,
Yes.
this happened, you did this and I'm kind of confused. I'm so glad that my son does this with me. I mean, if there are things that I say and lessons that I teach and then there's something that is contradictory to that, he will ask me why. He'll seek to understand, and he won't just try and process this like, oh well, dad said this and then did something else, so I guess that means that dad's a fraud all the time.
Right.
I've done enough to where he'll call me out, and I think it's wise as a dad. This is not to toot my own horn, but just something that we ought to do is when we are called out by our children to actually listen to them and not just
Mm.
immediately flip our lid just because we think, well, I'm the dad, they don't have the authority to call me out for something that I messed up on. If you messed up, just own the mistake and make it right and make it
So
better,
true.
and value the relationship above that.
Well,
um
you're teaching them, if you want them to be good at asking for apologies and to be sorry, you have to demonstrate that. You have to train that in them.
right,
And the best way of training is to demonstrate.
right.
I'm very quick because I mess up all the time to my kids. I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
I would you forgive me? I should not have reacted in that way.
Yep.
And he'll be like, oh, it's okay, daddy. He'll give me a hug. Because what I'm doing is I'm just giving him the model. This
Right.
is how you do it. And
Right.
we move on from that.
Right. And what's beautiful is the sooner we can model those things to our kids, the easier and the more common these practices become for them, so that when they're our age and they're
Hmm.
married, they're not contemplating within themselves, I know I messed up, but I don't know how to apologize because I'm not vulnerable enough to do that. I've never seen it done. And they're wrestling with what we're talking about that men, and I would assume even women, wrestle with in marriages.
Yes. And that's pride that keeps us away from that. By the way, if you argue in front of your kids, you should be able to, I'm saying with your wife, you should be able to make up in front of your kids as well.
Yeah, that's good.
And if you overstep a boundary, then you apologize in front of them too.
Yep.
I'm a firm believer in that because, again, you're showing them the model. This is how you treat your wife.
Right.
And if you overstep, you say you're sorry, you make amends, and you try to be better. You reassure them. So and that gives the kids so much, just so much confidence. I would When we first got married a long time ago, um, and I'm explaining why this is so important
Yeah.
to apologize and to make things right. But um, when we first had Adeline, of course, every parent wants their kids to be brilliant, and so of course I wanted my kids to be brilliant. I bought a book on how to make our kids brilliant, and I was reading it, and one thing stood out in the whole book. He says, people ask me all the time because I'm a neurosurgeon or brain science, how to get your kids into Harvard, how to create these incredible kids. He's like, if I would give you one thing to focus on, he said, go home and love your wife. He
Wow.
says, because what you're doing is you're creating a safe environment for them to sprout. If you're creating a turbulent environment that they're not safe, that they have nowhere to go, they're worried, they're not going to allow their curiosity to flow. They're not going to actually experience play. Kids need to play.
Yep.
Play is so important because they're learning about the world. Their neurons are firing. They're building, themselves. They're learning so much. But think about how play is so. Think about like how well do you play if you're stressed?
Right.
We don't play or unless we're just getting away from our stress, but we don't play very well or curious or open-hearted, just having fun with tons of stress. So if your kids are under stress, how the way we could start bringing more confidence is through marriage, but also like just making amends whenever you do cross a boundary.
Right. Yeah, that's so good. And with the amends, another thing that goes into that is the relational structure that you set for your kids, because there's so many people today who will tell you that it's not what you know, it's who you know. If you want to be successful, it's
Mm,
having these good relationships, but
yeah.
creating this model relationship in front of your kids for them to see, like, oh, this is how people get along. Oh, this is how people overcome conflict. Oh, this is how people resolve their issues one with another.
Right.
Allowing them to be exposed to that at a young age, it normalizes these things that so many people tend to struggle with as they grow up. So
Yes.
we're only setting them up by focusing on ourselves for the benefit and for the sake of our marriage, and ultimately for the benefit and the sake of our children, our family as a whole. Let me
Absolutely.
ask you this with the curiosity element, though, because it seems like maybe we've identified a predominant struggle in marriages, that people
Hmm.
struggle with themselves, and that it's not necessarily conflict with the person that they're married to. It's just now they're seeing themselves for who they are,
Hmm.
and this is a struggle that we have, especially as men, as you get into the emotional components of who we are, because there is an emotional component to who we are, and a lot of men
Yes.
just don't want to confront that and face it. We want to be tough and we want to be manly. We want to just navigate and keep
Hmm.
moving ahead.
Yep.
So we do have those components that we have to face, the past that we have to deal with, and a remedy to this that we've talked about is curiosity. And
Hmm.
curiosity is being courageous enough to actually confront ourselves and look within ourselves and say, why do I tick this way? Why do I do that? Why do I do this? What is really at the heart of this issue that I deal with?
Yeah.
Now, when we go down this path of curiosity to ultimately improve ourselves and to improve our marriage and our family, is this something that we should have help with? I know you talked about it within the context of prayer, but is this something that we should try to start doing alone initially, or should this be, maybe we try it with our wife, or maybe before we try it with our wife, we try it with a close friend that we have, and we just go out to eat and we say, buddy, let me do something a little weird. Let me open up in a way I've never done. What for a man who has never gone down that path of curiosity to just open some doors that they really need to open and some
Hmm.
issues that they need to confront. Um, how do we start down that path of curiosity?
Mm. That's a really good question. Um, well, I think first, educating yourself. So, listening to podcasts like this invite introspection. And I think that's really important. Um, like we were both talking about and dancing around, men are not very good at just being present and to being a student of themselves. I know it may sound weird, but understanding why you tick and how you tick. And I mean, just think about like right now, I'm working on a mower. I'm so frustrated. I can't get my mower going. I have taken the sucker apart. Um, and obviously, did something wrong. I don't know how it works. It's still broken. I might have to take it to the mechanic. I've watched a ton of videos, and I think sometimes we're like that.
Right.
Sometimes you could fix it. I've fixed my mower before. Took the carb apart, cleaned out all those fuel jets, and there all that stuff. It's not still not working, and I'm so frustrated. And we're so ready to fix external things, and a lot of men that I've seen are low emotional intelligence, and they don't know how they tick. They don't know how relationships work, just because as men we're not taught. I think the skills of emotional intelligence, and so when we're talking about all of this stuff, it's very scary for what are you talking about? Looking at myself deeper, being curious. It's simply being able to attach. Well, first of all, knowing your emotions. Let me just get really simple. Um, I was actually very low EQ, which is emotional intelligence, for a long time, um, and simply so you have to have words for your feelings. So most guys know what anger feels like. Most people know what or most guys know what sad is. Most guys know what depression maybe feels like. Um, but our emotional vocabulary is very low, and only we a lot of times pay attention to the negative ones. And so starting to shine the introspective spotlight more often on how you're feeling, and also slowing it down to being curious about like in the moment. So when we react, instead of like shaming ourselves and just trying to move on or just trying to fix it, we slow down and ask, why did I act that way? Why do I have anger? And if maybe you have stories around this thing in the past, maybe curiously go back to those moments, and sometimes you can bring it to God in prayer. Seeing that image and saying, God, please help this part of me that I'm still reacting out of this, possibly this time. Um, Another way of being curious would be writing it down. There's an incredible power in writing things down. So actually, there was a study done recently in New Zealand, where it took a whole bunch of participants, had a control group, and they said, what we want you to do is just write down what you're going to do today and in the next few days. Don't write any of your feelings. Just write about like what's happening currently, kind of journal, but without the feelings aspect. And then they took the other group, and said, what we want you to do is write down for the next 3 days. We want you to write about your traumas or the hardest, most difficult things in your life. Your sadness, your dad wasn't around. You never did fun things. You felt that you were third priority on his list, that he wasn't there for you, the abandonment issue, or, your dad beat you, or you were sexually abused by an uncle, or whatever those things are. You write those down for 3 days. So then all of those people, both groups, had um, a procedure done that opened up their hand. So they had a big scar on their hand. 3 weeks after the procedure, they started recording how fast both of these groups were healing. They actually found that the group that recorded their traumas for 3 days, and this is like 3 weeks prior, the group that recorded their traumas healed significantly faster, like many times faster than the other group. And that's physical healing, and that was only a few days before. But what we're finding out is that our mind and our body are intricately connected. You can't separate. So the emotions that I'm feeling, whether I'm negatively talking to myself, whether I'm experiencing depression, whether I'm living in anger, these affect us. And we know trauma actually has incredibly connected, like we know scientifically, that's connected to so many diseases and illnesses. So there is a way of reversing all this, of course, or at least helping people live with it, but disempowering those traumas from people's lives and helping them live a vibrant life.
Mm.
Um, but there is a huge connection. So being more curious, like what is there? Not assuming just because it happened in the past that it doesn't affect me anymore. We know that that's not true. It does affect you. You are a product of all your past experiences, because those experiences treat us how to act in the present. They shape how we react, how we act. So by becoming more aware of this stuff back in the past and processing it. So I actually have a tool I can give you a link to. It's called the Total Truth Letter. You can start to process some of those feelings, those pains, the anger that's in there, and live more in peace and harmony, because that's what God wants to do. He wants you to live in shalom,
Yep.
live in peace. And anything that breaks shalom is something that needs to be looked at. And so that's how I'd advise people to go about, and of course reading books around this, like the book I talked about, um, The Body Keeps the Score,
Yep.
and other books that just kind of talk about your inner world. Be more curious, that you are more complex than you give yourself credit for. And if you just open up and listen to those thoughts and listen to God's voice teaching you, I think we can be more student of ourselves. And when we're able to be a student of ourselves, we have the bandwidth and the ability to be students of our wife, to learn her and what makes her tick and be curious. Because if I haven't been studious with how I feel, it's easy for me to be triggered into defensiveness and all these things, because there'll be I don't want to look at that. I don't want to go near that. So I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, I think so. I have one follow up with that. So, as we start down this path of curiosity,
Mm-hmm.
where we are identifying issues, sources of issues that we face, I think one of the things that can be difficult, and this goes back to what we started with on the topic of vulnerability, is once we've identified this weak spot in our armor,
Mm-hmm.
is that something that we should keep to ourselves? And now we have this revelation about why we do this. We understand this. Should we just keep it to ourselves and continue on with life? Or is there ever an appropriate time? Is it always appropriate? Is it never appropriate for us to be vulnerable with our spouse and to tell our wife, look, I've been thinking about this. I know I deal with anger. I know I've been angry a lot, and I'm pretty sure it's because of this. And I want you to know, should we open up with everything that we discover about ourselves to our wife, or are there ever appropriate times to keep things close to ourselves?
Hmm. That's a really good question. I think I'm in favor of really being open. Um, I'm sure there's an example of some time where we don't want to dump on them.
Sure.
Um, sometimes, okay, this is one situation. If there's been broken trust, and the person is looking at all this stuff like, this is why I did it, and it feels to the wife like they're justifying their breach in trust, that would not be appropriate.
Okay.
But often I think going curiously to those pains, going curiously and opening up and looking at these things, um, I think that having your wife as a sounding board is incredibly beneficial. I think that's why God put us together.
Hmm.
Because remember that marriage, why did God put people together? It wasn't so that we just, okay, so sorry, let me back up. The world sold us a myth that what we look for is compatibility in marriage. And what they mean by what the world means with compatibility is that we find someone that's so perfect for us, that fits our life just like a puzzle piece, that when they put together, it's like nothing needs to change. So we could be together and I could just be myself forever. And I think compatibility is the result of marriage.
Hmm.
So of course there's some base things. We have to be attracted to them. We have to sign up for life for this person. You have to really enjoy this person.
Right.
To do some of the, we all get that. But there's an overemphasis in the world. And I think that marriage is ultimately about sanctification. And so this person has your best interest in mind. This person your wife is a good-willed person. And I think if you went to them and just said, hey, babe, like, I've been thinking a lot about this stuff, and then asking permission, saying, would now be a good time to share maybe where this depression is coming from, or why I've been so absent. I've been thinking about that. Like, why do I have such a hard time being present with you and the kids? And I think I have stories behind that. And I just kind of wanted to think out loud with you. I'm not trying to pick at you or blame you for any of this. I just want to think out loud and try to figure this out. Would you help me do that?
Yeah.
I don't know very many wives who would be like, no, get away from me.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think that's a good way. Normally, asking permission to share is one of the most,
Got it.
and sometimes it's not a great time. The kids are swinging off the light fixtures, and
Yeah.
not a good time. But
Oh, yeah.
and also too, side by side, not looking face to face. Sometimes doing this work while you're driving is a really helpful. Or go for a walk.
Yeah.
Walking actually helps you process hard emotions much more efficiently.
Mm. Yeah, I think that's great advice, because I think it would be wrong of us to assume that if we have all of these insecurities and all these issues that we are wrestling with internally after we start down this path of curiosity, that all of a sudden we're just going to be experts in communicating those feelings and those issues to our spouse. So I think working our way up to that point to being a better communicator about these issues, where it's I don't want to have to try and hold eye contact with someone while I'm telling them my deepest, darkest secrets and concerns and trauma that I faced as a child that I've never told anybody else.
True.
Yeah.
True.
So
But this is also like, think of this not as like one conversation.
yeah,
This is a journey of self revelation that happens over time. This
yeah,
is and as things happen and you start opening that door, more things will come and more connections will come, and you'll be much more aware of your current state of being as you go through this process.
yeah. And I think that's something that requires a little twist in our perspective as men, because we're very project oriented. We like to start things, finish things, and then be done with those things. And so I think it's important for us when it comes to understanding who we are and growing as men, and also growing in our compatibility with our spouse, that this is a lifelong project. That
Yes.
this isn't something I'm going to do over the weekend. I'm not just going to lock myself away in the garage for the next 3 days and then I'll be done. That's not what's going to
Yeah.
happen. It's going to take till death do us part for me to figure
Yep.
this thing out. And then
Yep.
when I finish the course, then the project will be done. And
Absolutely.
I think that's really, really wise advice on how to approach that, how to think of that. Not to view this as, if I don't have everything that I'm dealing with resolved in the next 6 months, then I continue to be a failure. I'm just going to keep working at this, and that's the right way forward.
Yeah. I mean, how long has Jesus taken to sanctify you?
Yeah, since day
Your whole
one.
life, right?
Yeah,
Yeah. So like, you're not going to figure it all out overnight. This whole life experience that we're living is a sanctification project. It's
yeah,
teaching us how to live forever
yep. That's so good.
in harmony.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Harmony and peace that you talked about. Well, I think that's wonderful what you've shared today. Dealing with those demons that we might have inside, that trauma that we deal with that maybe we've never fully confronted or faced, that sometimes we're probably too scared to do, but we
Yeah.
won't even open up about that. I think that is a big hurdle, and that is a big obstacle, because like you said, there is no one who has been absent from hurt. Like, we all have something, and we all have responded to particular things that shape us and influence the way that we function even to this day. So starting down that path of curiosity to identify those things, to confront, to think on, to chew on these things, and to seek resolve, not tomorrow and not next year, but when life is done. And to not do it alone, but to do it side by side with our spouse.
Yes.
I think that's wise. I think that's great. Let me ask you my little legacy question that I like to ask dads that I have on the podcast. The best piece of advice that you would offer to dads, what would it be?
Connect before you correct.
Okay.
I always, I have a son that's really, has a will.
Yep.
And I have a will, and I know what's best for him, and he doesn't. But he doesn't always want to do what I want,
Right.
and it's really easy for me to get angry and frustrated. And just for a while, I've just been focusing on connection. Always connection. Because when you can correct when you're connected, it's always done with love rather than a penalty. I'm not trying to punish my son for disobeying. I have to first, I'm loving my son and I'm correcting behavior. Correction is always aimed at connection.
Yeah.
But it's not a penal system. So I think that's one of my favorite things that I've really worked on is finding areas, being present and connecting and having fun. And that always gives space for correction when it's necessary.
Yep. I think that's so good. I think as dads, we're leaders, and leaders don't function like dictators, then they don't function like coaches. Leaders function from a place of relationship because they genuinely care and they genuinely seek to serve. And it's a good line for us to remember: connect before we correct. Adam, it has been a privilege having you on the podcast. Before we sign off here, let everyone know how they can find more about Dear Young Married Couple and everything that you and your wife are doing.
Absolutely. Yeah, you could just look on Instagram. We post very, like almost every day. You can find us at Dear Young Married Couple, and online at dearyoungmarriedcouple.com. YouTube, we have videos on YouTube, Dear Young Married Couple. And we talk on, mental health, trauma, everything pretty much having to do with living a good life.
Yep.
Because that's what we're trying to inspire in others and do ourselves.
Yep.
So, and also, if you guys are interested in that way of processing called the Total Truth Letter, I could share that with you, and maybe you can give them a link.
Yeah, I'll include it in the description of this episode for sure.
Nice, and that would be a really fantastic way. It'll put you on our mailing list and kind of connect you with us, so we can stay connected and walk this journey together.
Awesome. Yeah, that's the best way to do it. It's always best to do things in community with other people, because trying to do it all by yourself, man, that's
Absolutely.
a lot. It's just too much.
We're not meant to be alone.
No, 100%. Well, Adam, thank you so much again for being with me. You have enriched us today. You have blessed us today with what you have shared, and I think you've given us a good step forward in starting down that path of curiosity. So thank you. Well, make sure you check out dearyoungmarriedcouple.com and the podcast that Adam and his wife Carissa do. Even if you don't consider yourself to be a young married couple, look, there are things that we all probably should have learned 5 years ago and 10 years ago that we absolutely missed. And learning those things today is still a great benefit. Plus, getting good refreshers along the way never hurts. So go check out what they're doing. But I want you to take to heart what was talked about today. I want you to remember this. If you struggle with insecurities, low self-esteem, questions about yourself, your past, trauma that you have faced, first of all, you're not alone. We've all been hurt, and we all have our issues, and we are all working to grow. At least we should be. And if you're not working to grow, I want you to start. And I want you to start wandering down that path of curiosity. I want you to start asking yourself, why is it that I respond the way that I do? What hurt me? If you need help with that, you have a friend. You have a wife. You can probably find a pastor. You can find a counselor. You can find someone to help you navigate this path of curiosity so that you can overcome these issues, so that you can control them instead of them controlling you. So you're not alone. You can get through this. Just start being a little bit curious. And again, you can check the show notes, the description of this episode for the link so that you can start that path with the resources that Dear Young Married Couple has to offer. This is Fathering Our Future, the podcast for dads. I'm Anthony Vandergriff. Thank you so much for being with me, and I hope you will join me next time. Thank you again for listening to Fathering Our Future. If this episode has served you or you believe it will serve another dad in the future, make sure that you leave a like, a comment, a review, or share this so that it can reach another dad. And so that you don't miss out on another episode, make sure you subscribe to Fathering Our Future wherever you listen to podcasts. And again, For more great content, head over to www.fatheringourfuture.com.